welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello and Evan Ginzburg. And today I will be introducing the guest, and I would think that if you were to add up the amount of time that this guest has known myself and Evan Ginzburg, you would have a record for the most amount of time that someone has known the two of us. And that is wrestling's greatest photographer, Mike Lano. Yes, thank you for being on our show. I knew Mike Lano as I walked in the doors to the Healdsburg Armory in 1999 to see my very first APW show. Mike and I, the rest of the APW crew, kayfabed me completely and pretended not to know me. So I sat down with Mike Lano and Alan Bolte, and you two were the only two people to talk to me at all during that entire show until I went backstage and hung out with the rest of the wrestlers. So I know you from as long as I know anything or anyone in independent wrestling. And Evan, you have your own history with Mike.
I know Mike since Scotch Hackenschmidt. We were the kids in row 3 center. That's right.
Yeah, 1903 or whatever.
That's right.
We've known each other a lot and been through lots of stuff. Ev, when I would come out a couple of times, because New York City is my favorite place to visit. We can't do it with the pandemic. But, I have all those memories like when I first started going to shoot, and I would stay at Arissy's house in the summer, and then he would come out to my, and so we're talking like 74 there, 75. But Ev would put me up, or like one time I watched an old girlfriend of his, her place in the Upper West Side, Ev, that really nice apartment.
Yeah, that goes back.
That's where I discovered the great Robin Bird from New York, who I would later have her on some other show I did, not with Evan. I can't remember, Evan, if we had her on Legends Radio.
I don't think so, but she was hot stuff back in the day. She was an ex-porn queen, and she did a public access show, and she was a lot of fun, Robin Bird.
I just got an email today out of the blue that her real name is Rhea, but Jasmine St. Clair is doing an autobiography, and I guess I'm going to dig up photos for that, too, because I was there for her training, and this is for XPW and all the other stuff before she even met Blue Meanie, Brian Heffron, and started her own promotion and stuff. So I guess she's completely, according to her, she's done with the East Coast and she's back in Marina del Rey, California. She was the first person who had anything to do with wrestling in Marina del Rey, and now it's the hotbed. Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch live there together, and Austin has his compound. Diamond Dallas Page has a compound with Scott Hall, his rehab compound there. There's tons of people because it's close to LAX, I guess, if they want to get on a jet and go anywhere.
And it takes a little bit of money to live there too. It's not exactly.
If it's on the water, it's a boat town. A lot of people have their boats there, and it was a lot more fun in the '60s. Now it's more. We can't use the term yuppies, but it's a lot of these Gen Yers, the people that are like doing all of the cancel culture stuff, which. Buddy, you and I were talking about the poor Joey Ryan, who's, well, I can't even say that because I'll probably get in trouble. But I've known him since he started. I've ridden with him. And he used to come up to APW even before he started Pro Wrestling Guerrilla with Disco Machine and introduced everybody to Tony Kazarian and John Cena and tons of talent from SoCal. And seeing him do that gimmick for maybe a couple of months on Impact Wrestling, Tuesday Nights Access, we'll give him a little plug. And now, so his gimmick was cancel culture, and now he's been canceled pretty much from wrestling, which he hasn't even had his day in court yet. But, when these charges come about, you are fired, you are done. It's like you didn't exist. Unless you're Sammy Guevara. He was back on TV after a month of sensitivity training, as I told Buddy.
Right. So
what I was asking... Shut up. And I actually want to ask this of you guys before you start asking me questions. Why did that not become a big national story? You had the Me Too movement, around Bill Cosby, and then the guy that took his own life and other scumbags. And that was huge. We were hearing stuff on a daily basis. But these many, many, many women in pro wrestling and a couple of males it involved talent and production people and bigwig upper tier management corporate types like Dave Lagana and NWA and stuff with these charges. And every single wrestling company, at least in the U.S., a couple in Mexico, obviously Europe, but none in Japan, and no NBC, no network affiliate stuff, no ESPN, no Sports Illustrated, not even tabloids covered this thing, which is mind-boggling for me. If you have a story this massive and it's crossing into real world stuff, why aren't we hearing about that stuff like on CNN and headline news every night, like they did with the Benoit crisis or all of those wrestlers that were dying left and right of drugs and stuff before the age of 35, whatever that was, 1997, 98.
Because most media still thinks wrestling's a joke. There's your answer.
Well, it's serious. Like in this case, like there are some big names, some legends that go back to early 70s, and I'm surprised that people probably know what I'm talking about without even saying it, that they've not had women come out. So unless there's non-disclosure agreements.
That's one of the problems there, Mike, is that Vince McMahon and some of the other organizations have these really strong NDAs. And in the case of, as you pointed out with Joey Ryan, he wasn't arrested. So there isn't the sense of police charges on top of it. It's still all allegations and stuff going on behind the scenes. And I don't think that most modern news wants to get involved in something like that because they don't want to get drawn into a lawsuit if it turns out that these allegations were false.
Yeah, but you had how many women, and Evan and I have talked about this over the years since the Cosby stuff. We were like in disbelief when Hannibal Buress first made that, and he lit a fire under that, and then everybody started talking about it pretty quickly, and boom, from there. How many women? It was like 80, 90 women that alleged stuff.
Yeah. So you had the fans posting on social media. They're all gold diggers. I mean, how ridiculous! I mean, out of 80, wouldn't you think somebody's telling the truth? Of course.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between he said, she said, and he said, they said.
But you had a lot of, the wrestlers who got in the most heat had like at least three, a lot of those UK NXT stars. But, Joey hit home. I'm not defending him because I don't know what happened, but I would think you should, or you deserve your day in court as opposed to allegations just thrown out there. And there was only, a couple. I'm again thinking there was 2, 3, there were more for other people, but all I can recall reading in the Observer was like 2, 3 for Joey, and then boom. And a bunch of promoters, people like myself who shared locker rooms or rode with Joey as I did and many other wrestlers, they all say, we never saw that kind of behavior. So I'm thinking, well, is it like the guy that all the neighbors say who murdered his whole family or something? Oh, he was a quiet, respectful guy. That type of thing. They had like no clue, or what's...
Or is he being railroaded? That's I guess we're not going to know unless, Dark Side of the Ring wants to do a story on it.
I'm sure they will. I suggested it to them. I go, instead of some of these lame things, like this year probably the lamest one they did, and some were good, and I still have been paid for my photos requested in there. I didn't get proper credit as promised for some of those, like the Snuka one and the Owen and the Benoit, which were good. The Benoit, and it was very hard to watch that, or Owen. But, the one they did about the brawl for all with the boxing thing, I mean, really, there was maybe 5 minutes of story there instead of padding it out for 50 minutes. So, but here you have something you can go to, even though it's like all allegations. There haven't been any court cases yet, or, whatever. But I don't know, it's just weird. This whole Corona thing. And I don't know what spurred it on. It was just like one woman, as with the Me Too movement, and then just blocked. And that's what happened with Greg Oliver took that letter to Cauliflower Alley. We were talking off air about that, to get them to decide to wisely not have a CAC Vegas convention this year, just unsafe. You don't want to be in a little test tube airplane flying there. You certainly don't want to be in those hotel rooms, which have looked filthy to me for years. It's an inexpensive hotel, many miles from the Strip.
Good luck eating at the buffets.
Oh, the buffets are done. They're all gone.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a totally different world out there. I wanted to rewind things a little bit, and I've never even asked you, how did you actually get started as a wrestling photographer? What was the first match that you took a photograph at, and how did it get started where you actually were able to get behind the scenes and start taking photographs ringside?
Well, I was friends with John Tolis, who I would later run the Tolis Brothers fan club. John Arizzi started the Blassie fan club, and he had one guy initially, uh, Frank Favalli, and, and John and I were pen paling. We might have been amongst the first earliest tape traders, because John would film like 8mm or 6mm at the Madison Square Garden. And when Meadowlands opened, the very first show there, January '74, was Bruno versus a Blassie managed Nikolai Volkov, who just returned to Tri-WF. And he would film stuff there. And then I was shooting already ringside. I'll get back to how that started. And my best friends since kindergarten, Mark and Gary Dawson, actor, game show host, etc. Richard Dawson's two kids, who I still maintain friendship with, and blah, blah, blah. They would film they would film similarly, except they got the audio. They got the Jimmy Lennon Sr. audio, which I think Evan's seen on some of this stuff. And they only did it from about early '72 through '75, when they kind of lost interest in wrestling. But we would trade, and also John and I'd already been doing it with other people, contributing to another fan club I did briefly before taking over the reins. So John asked me, we were tape trading. We would tape, and maybe Evan did this too. We would, with old school micro cassette, or not a micro cassette, but just a plain old cassette recorder. We put the mic right on TV. This was way before VCRs started coming out, the first Betamax around early '74. We'd hold up the mic, and every week for at least Los Angeles, the every Wednesday TV at the Olympic, the every Saturday KCOP, Channel 13, I'd tape all the promos and intros and stuff. And then we would, trade, and we would listen, and then or watch if it was the video separate from the audio cassettes. We'd send it to the other party. I would send that stuff to John. He'd look at it, send it back, and vice versa. So I was already kind of acquainted with John Tolis, who was kind of one of those backbone things, like Fred Blassie for the Olympic Auditorium, the Hollywood Mike LaBelle wrestling office, and they just needed another photographer, because one guy, Phil Miller, had stopped coming, and he was working sort of as a sidebar to the main guy, and the guy that taught me wrestling photography. I asked him, it was Theo Arrett, he's kind of known for the apartment house wrestling stuff and what were later known as the After magazines, but Stanley Weston is the godfather of wrestling magazines, and that's what we call them, Weston magazines. The Wrestler and Inside Wrestling in the early '70s on. Later, they dropped those titles or added on Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and that's the only American wrestling magazine, now. No more WWF magazine, not even special issues. They don't mess with that, which is kind of sad that's gone. I hope, Evan, I don't know about you, buddy, but I hope you guys are like me. I still like having a physical thing in my hands, a newspaper or magazine. And,
oh, yeah.
The pandemic, those things are like, I mean, I can't even tell you how many magazines I was subscribing or whatever. I'm getting stuff from like Arthritis Monthly saying, due to the pandemic, we're ceasing publication. Those are like stores. I just went out, and I was a little late getting back to practice doing the Skype with Buddy, but at a giant, like a mall where we have a grocery store, like every other business, has out of business signs. So because of this horrific pandemic, it's bad. Thank God people are at least wearing masks more in the last week than all the knuckleheads that have not and have fought that and used all kinds of excuses or whatever BS. And if anybody watching, you wear a mask, put it over your nose. Don't put it below your nose, because then it's like not wearing anything. You're still exhaling particles.
I think it's good to put it below your chin, because it firms up your chin and it doesn't sag when you're older.
Yeah, well, it hides the neck.
That's right. It tightens the neck muscles.
I mean, I hate to say it, Evan, but all the worry and the panic that you had in New York for the last few months, now we're suffering that in California. with our rates climbing as much as it has. So
How can we be worse than moronic? I hate to say it because I love Florida. I have lots of friends there, but Florida or Georgia, where I have lots of family, how could we be doing worse in California? New York did it right, and there's a guy who, man, I wish he would run against Trump because he would just eat him alive. In what's his face, your governor, who's so great.
Cuomo.
Yeah, Cuomo's so great. I wish he would. I don't watch our governor or our local mayor. Those guys do those nightly stupid things, and it's just boring. I go, you guys got to spiff it up because no kids, the audience that you need to get to demand that they wear masks, they're not going to watch this crap. But Cuomo, I watch those sessions. I get the national feed, the New York channels, and I'm riveted because that guy knows what he's doing, and he did it. Look at him, he did it right. We might have been the first to do the self-imposed stay-at-home thing by just a few days, but New York really overtook that, and Cuomo ran with that ball, and I think he could whip Trump's ass in a heartbeat.
Personally, I'm hoping for a Kanye West Flavor Flav ticket. I think that would work.
Wait, don't you think Kanye's out after his little crying fit? And I don't want to disparage the guy if he has some mental issues and stuff and these problems with Kim Kanye, but he was like crying on a stage. I thought he already pulled out, so we don't have to worry about him inadvertently stealing votes.
He could jump back in, though. He's crazy enough to want to jump back into it, on an hourly basis. We could, have to keep track of him. And
Kanye cut a promo on Harriet Tubman. That didn't go over too well.
No, maybe
he could have Nick Cannon as his VP. Nick Cannon with all the trouble he's in lately.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to go there.
He was at a boxing press conference as the announcer, and then he did the announcing at the Oakland Coliseum for a show that, of course, that stupid ice skating gal that it was part of that 2007.
Tanya Harding.
Tanya no-showed that thing. She was at the press conference, and then she locked herself in her dressing room, and her team snuck her out of there. She never did show up for the fight that Nick Cannon was the MC, but I got to interview him and spend time with him. Super nice guy, funny, very talented guy. So it pains me whatever he did on the podcast talking about melanin pigment. I'll leave it at that.
So I want to get back to your photography because, of course, that's why we have you here. Is because
I think it was the Tolis Blassie match was the first time, the first one I shot, and there was some chic. That was the first one I shot. It's been so many. I was there when Black Gordman debuted as a babyface, so they would always pair any Hispanic guy that came in. Neil Moskerson, 1967, with Pepper Gomez, and even when Pedro Morales came in, they would pair him so he would grasp his credibility that Pepper Gomez had, because Pepper was born and raised and went to school at LA Tech. So you would see all these guys. So I remember when Moskers came in, and then when Morales a little bit later. Anybody, they were immediately paired with poor Pepper Gomez. So I had to get these guys over. And then also the medics, Los Medicos de Mexico. I'm not sure if they were the originals, but they did some six-mans as the trio of baby faces, Technicos, with Pepper Gomez. So who ended up, buddy, he lived like 3-4 blocks from me off of Santa Clara in Alameda until he passed away. And then we were looking after his widow, Bonnie. But
I wanted to ask you, what makes a great wrestling photograph? What do you look for when you're ringside to get you to that particular, what you think is going to be a killer photo?
The eyes. You always want to get, I saw something on a documentary on seniors last night that my wife brought up. I think it was from ARC, but it was a very good documentary called Living Your Best Life. But the photographer said something that I've always followed is try to get them to look right at you, piercing. So it's a window to their soul, which is kind of, whatever to say because it's been overused and stuff. So I don't want to bore people with that. But for example, I shot everywhere, pretty much almost, not all the territories, but pretty much most of them. I made up for missing Calgary when I went up there as the Hart family photographer in December 15th of 1995 for the Stu Hart 80th birthday party and the 45th anniversary of Stampede Wrestling, and got to shoot at the house and shot the dungeon and all that stuff. Had Owen Hart come and pick me up at the airport in blazing snow. But one of the most famous shots that a lot of people always say they like, and I agree, is my shot from so that's why I was talking about the territory. It's the Chicago Amphitheater, one of my favorite venues next to Madison Square Garden or Kiel in St. Louis, etc. Was a shot of Heenan, and then in the middle of Bockwinkel and Ray. This is the night they dropped their titles to Bruiser and Crusher. Huge riot at the Chicago Amphitheater, which is a fantastic building, great wrestling town. And they're all looking at me. And Ev, I don't know if you've seen that photo, but it's a very powerful one now that we've lost all three. And then there were two that I did that Jeff Walton, my boss. So Jeff Walton ran the Blassie fan club, and when he had to give it up to do PR, and he got actually hired from his great work with that fan club, the Blassie fan club, and then Arizzi and I took it over. John did initially, and then asked me to replace his vice president, and we won all these WFIA awards and stuff. So my immediate boss, Jeff, when I would shoot at ringside, he was the guy I would report to. I didn't thankfully have to deal with Mike LaBelle. I would get just work with Jeff and everything. And he sent two of my shots that became covers for when Vince, as Evan knows, when Vince McMahon started, or in the 70s, all he had was like one piece of glossy paper folded in half, so i.e. 4 pages, sort of. And that was his program. And I don't know what they charged for that, but whatever. But Jeff had sent to Vince when two of our talent, first Chavo Guerrero and then Roddy Piper, we're talking about 1977, came in, and they were, just like the surprise one-offs coming in, like when Eddie Graham would come up from Florida or send up Mike Graham or whoever, or Billy Robinson came from the AWA, one-offs. But two of my photos where the guys were piercing and staring right at you were used as the program covers. I was really proud for the Tri-WF at Madison Square Garden. Again, one of Chavo Guerrero Sr., one of Roddy Piper. We're talking again 77 or so, late 77, early 78. And so I just try to always make sure when I'm posting them, either in the ring or in the locker room, whether I'm in Mexico City or Japan or Europe, get them to look at me and then try to capture their inner essence. And I'll usually, like in the back in the dressing room, like with whoever, where it's Taya Valkyrie or her husband, John Morrison, John Hennigan's his real name, just ask them to do their stuff. Because these guys, if you just ask them, they make your life easy. They already have their own set poses that they show you. It's like Barbara Streisand. She has, like, I think the left side of her face she doesn't want shown in photos. So they know what angles. They know if they're going to do a Thez MMA type thing with the fists or a foot up pretending to kick. They already have it. So, like, why reinvent the wheel? Ask them to do all the poses in their arsenal, and you get great shots that way.
Mike, out of all the territories and all the matches you have seen, which are some of the greatest matches, just as far as watching, not shooting, as far as a fan? What matches come to mind? Because you've seen everything everywhere.
There was a great hour, and I was shooting it, and I think Napolitano was there with me in St. Louis at Kiel, so it must have been 75. Dory Funk Jr. Against Harley Race.
Wow.
NWA title match where it went an hour, and about 40 minutes into it, Dory's boot came off, and they just, they didn't take the time to have him put his boot back on. So I don't think that was an angle, and he just wrestled the rest of the match with just one boot on. Jack, oh God, there were a lot of Jack Briscoe against Terry Funk had a full 30-minute Broadway, of all things, during a title tournament to see who would go on to meet Victor Rivera for the, with that locker room packed with talent, for the America's title, our top title in Los Angeles. It was like February of 73. And the Sheik against Victor Rivera was on top for Rivera's America's Championship. But the opening match of this tournament to determine the number one contender were two guys, like Terry Funk had been a couple of times in L.A., Jack Briscoe never had. And these guys put on a real clinic. There was, Terry just did all scientific wrestling. That was the first time we saw Terry debut his bleached blonde hair and goatee look, which Terry was one of those guys who would completely change his appearance every couple of years. If you look at him, in 60s Amarillo, early 70s, and then here 73, he would adopt a look that he would have to this day. And that was a fantastic match. Bruno against Spiros Arion at Madison Square Garden. out of this world. I just love the aura of anything Bruno did because he just sometimes he'd have a towel around his neck, sometimes nothing, like Mike Tyson, just come down there, the place would go bananas. Now, to get heat, these guys have valets, there's fireworks, there's music, there's all of this crap, fantastic ring garb like The Miz, and there's no comparison. You know, they don't have what we called in the 70s, 80s aura, and that's particularly my Japan. I worked for both Japanese weekly magazines until Gong went under in a bankruptcy thing around 2002, 2003. But I worked at the same time as a writer, photographer, columnist for both Japanese weeklies, Shukon Gong, Weekly Gong, and Shukon Pro, otherwise known as baseball, Shaw, but all it is wrestling, a little bit of MMA. And what was the question, Blake? You could tell I'm getting old.
Greatest matches you.
Okay, greatest matches.
Yeah.
So I said the Billy Robinson Vern Gagne. If I didn't, I want to throw that in there. That was incredible, absolutely incredible. Even though it didn't have a finish, but that was in Illinois. I know the Coliseum show for Los Angeles, Tolis versus Blassie on top. So like the two longest, or at least most well-publicized feuds at the time. Sheik Brazil was underneath Tolis Blassie. Gordon McGlath against, so for a whole entire card of incredible matches, two heel tag teams, Shibuya Saito versus Black Gordon, Great Goliath, Neil Moskowitz against El Solitario, the original, who passed away, out of this world. You know, Moskowitz was Moskowitz, the most famous masked man, but Solitario like could put him to shame as a worker, and Moskowitz was exciting to watch, but this guy El Solitario was just out of this world. Gosh. I think the Ivan Koloff versus Neil Moskowitz match, the very first Roosevelt Stadium show that John Arizzi, Napolitano, Frank Amato, and I were the ringside photographers for that, in the rain, pouring rain at New Jersey Roosevelt Stadium. I think it was 75. It was the very first of 3 Roosevelt Stadium shows. And such an important card that, like, in the dressing room, just going there to spy and check out stuff. They hadn't yet signed up. Johnny Powers and Inoki, Ricky Starr, who nobody had seen in many, many years, Fez, and rumored were Munchnick and the Sheik, who I never saw back there. But this was Eddie Einhorn's first wrestling back thing he lost a ton of money on, but it was taking on both Vince Sr. primarily and the NWA with national TV. And, oh man, they had one Beacon Theater TV match, Moskowitz versus Lou Thez, that was fantastic. That was about 10 minutes. It was with, TV time draw from what I remember. But there have been, in Japan, oh my, lots of great stuff. A lot of Fujinami early on stuff. Ricky Choshu against Tiger Jeet Singh. I don't know, it's hard to remember stuff. The Bruno Sammartino Battle Royal was perhaps the greatest Battle Royal I ever saw. January, I think, 19th of 1972. And Battle Royals are notoriously horrific because you can't do much. The ring is, you can't move around, so you can't do a whole lot. But that Battle Royal was amazing, and that's the one where Bruno also lifted Haystack Calhoun and then did the football pileup on Haystack Calhoun to eliminate him. We're talking like 20 guys. I don't know how people didn't get legit injured. They all did this football pileup on to eliminate Calhoun. Oh man, that was the only time Bruno and Neil Moskowitz, to my knowledge, were ever in the same ring together. They of course met at a Hall of Fame when both were inducted at separate times, but in the ring and laying hands on each other anywhere in the world. So that was a thrill, and you could still mark out for stuff. When matches are fantastic, like Billy Robinson, Vern Gagne, you mark out for it. Or Gene Kiniski pretty much doing anything. Gene Kiniski against Johnny Valentine in St. Louis. Who wouldn't mark out for that?
Well, here's one thing that I would say about you that's incredibly unique, is that, yes, there are a lot of East Coast folks who've covered wrestling, but I don't think there's anyone that I've ever talked to that has covered more West Coast wrestling than you have in your life. You just
I fly around. I fly. I've done a lot of Ring of Honor and Evolve. Gabe Sapolsky was running that, and that was absolutely terrific. I know Evan has seen all that. Evan has the luxury because, and I was thinking when I saw the Hana Kimura tribute Ring of Honor TV show, and if you have Ring of Honor on your whatever Sinclair network, even though they're ultra conservative, or you can watch it on the website. But I was thinking, where's Ev sitting here watching Hana Kimura, who died at the New Japan ROH Madison Square Garden show about, what was it, ever, like a year and a half ago?
Last April, they had the ROH show at the Garden with New Japan.
Yeah, of 2019.
Yeah.
But you were there. You had the distinct. I never got to photograph her, which is something I lament. I feel badly about, and I always, whenever I do anybody's radio show or podcast, I always salute Hana Kimura. It's a lot of bullying and wrestling, and for her to take her own life, I know it wasn't wrestling related, but she was like only 22. And that's just horrific. So I always try, I should have done it at the beginning, is just ask people to look up Hana Kimura. But what a terrific Ring of Honor special that was. The few times that she was in there with her tag partner from Stardom and stuff. It bothers me. Wrestling is such a small community, and it's like everybody should be supporting each other, but it's never been that way. And even, during the pandemic now, we were all able to collectively plead with Brian Blair to move the cauliflower, to next year, not hold it this year. Where that was the thing I told him back in March. Carl Lauer's like 80 or 80 plus. What would you do if like he got sick and got this thing? We're hearing about people as young as 14 and 12 dying from it, and lots of people in their 30s now as it kind of morphs. So there's variants of it. Being a dentist, a legit dentist before Dr. Britt Baker in AEW. I don't think I not tried to interview her, but they were only parsing, I guess, people out for Busted Open. Have either of you guys, I'm throwing this out there, listened to the Busted Open show on Sirius XM in terms of...
No, I don't have Sirius.
I don't. There's any more terrestrial radio. It's now, everybody has podcasts, and meaning from Jim Ross to...
Guilty.
Oh, you guys, obviously. And Evan and I, Ev, how long did we do that show with Rick?
Probably 8 years. Legends Radio, probably 8 years, 7 or 8.
How about that show when you brought tons of people? I did too, and like we had just our favorite people. I brought on Julie Newmar, who I didn't know went to the same. I just learned the other day she went to my same high school. So when this thing goes away and we can meet, my high school's going to. Back down in Southern California, they're going to honor her. But Marty Allen, I just brought Paul Reiser, people that I liked. I would just contact their publicists.
A lot of them are gone. Billy Paul, Cuba Gooding Sr. from the Main Ingredient. A lot of these guys are gone now.
So it's important, like the thing, like Evan was doing WBAI with Fred Giabold, and I forget what happened. If I gave Ev Art Barr, Eddie Guerrero's contacts, or he got it through this guy with the initials EG, who I won't mention. But did you have both Art and Eddie, or just Eddie?
What happened was Art had just died, and Eddie came on a few weeks later onto our show, and this was late night, and he was just sobbing. I'll never forget it. He was just sobbing through the interview. And it was very powerful, very powerful. Yeah,
there's some of my greatest. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after Art Barr had died. Yeah.
The photos I have of them in Mexico, and then all of the Ron Scholar stuff, which is like a purchased. His promotion was like a purchased, along with Marquez Brothers Cheese, of all of those AAA shows in the U.S. Ron would list himself as the promoter and stuff, but. And they were fantastic. Like that very first LA Sports Arena, completely sold out. But the photos I got of Art and Eddie in the back, and then with them with the real, Gringos Locos, which was Vampiro and Chris Jericho and Norman Smiley. Conan and Rey Mysterio were sort of fraternal members. But those core 5 guys, and then Art and Eddie, I got them doing so much mischief, pouring coke down somebody's neck, or goofing behind Ron Scholar's back, or they were just really fun-loving. And I know it was like the Benoit thing. It was hard to watch when he was talking about Eddie, similar to Eddie, for any of us who talked to him, or the show Evan did with him, talking about Art. Was, boy, what a nice guy. And he had been the subject of a lot of rumors, Art Barr, but I never saw any negative behavior with him. And he was just a great guy and so in command. Boy, he and Eddie, if you want to look at their stuff, well before the World Wrestling Peace Festival, which is when Eddie got the look-see with Eric Bischoff, and he hired him along with, basically Conan and Rey Mysterio from that thing in early '96, April of '96, to bring in all those guys to really make that new WCW Nitro show full of that talent. But it's just too bad that Art Barr didn't get to make it there with Eddie. But if you really want to see Eddie at his best and Art at his best, just look at the stuff that they did as Los Gringos Locos. Even on Ron Scholar's shows where he paired him with Sherry Martel, who you would have thought may have held them back, but she added to the mix as their manager.
I think between the three of us, we've lost so many friends in this business. You could fill a small arena. And I'm working on a book right now, and it's just heart-wrenching. I have articles on Johnny Valiant and Nikolai and Larry Sweeney, who we did The Wrestler with, and Gordon Scazzeri, who ended up in a welfare hotel at the end after burning through all his money promoting wrestling. There's a lot of tragic stories, and we've lost a lot of friends, and it's just a tough business.
Eddie Gilbert, another close friend of mine, he and Jim Cornette were the first guys to subscribe to my Tolos Brothers fan club. And to lose Eddie, who I have so many good memories with, like shooting there at his debut at Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis when he was just young, skinny, he didn't look like he belonged in the ring, but obviously he could deliver. And then he and his dad, Tommy, teaming up a couple of days later at Kansas City Memorial Hall, way before Eddie went to the Tri-WF to work for Vince, and then he bulked up a little by then. Yeah, Eddie and, oh God, all the people at the Stu Hart thing that I was describing earlier from December '95. Rhonda Singh, who was Bertha Faye in WWF and Monster Ripper in Japan and Mexico and Puerto Rico, losing her and Brian Pillman and Davey Boy even, and just go on and on and on. Stu Hart and
along with Crash Holly and Mark Smith, from APW, and Roland Alexander as well, and not that he was in great shape, but another person that was gone well before he was even
he was fully flying. He had a lot of stress, even though he was overweight, but he had constant source, a couple of individuals who just constantly bullied him and stuff, and he said, it was awful stress that he put up with, and doing that, I just don't get why people aren't more supportive, or just whatever. If somebody is doing what have you in wrestling, because I don't see that kind of stuff in boxing or roller derby. They seem to be more united as a community. Wrestling is even globally, it's still a small community. There's the casual fans. A lot of them are just turned away. If you look at the ratings nosedive, at least the Raw and SmackDown. Fortunately, it's up in demographics for the best night of wrestling. I don't have to even say this. Is Wednesdays, obviously, with NXT and AEW. Fantastic stuff. But, buddy, I hope we can get into, before I've got to go, the 2007?
Yeah, 2007 Wrestle Fan Fest, please. I was saving that, but we can uncork that fine bottle of vinegar for all of the other wrestling folks, because let me just give a little bit of background on it for you and me, because you brought me in as your photography assistant.
Yeah,
so you were able to get me into this thing, so I didn't have to pay. So I was carrying your bags and your camera stuff, but then I was able to sneak in, because you got me an all access pass. I was able to sneak around and take my own camera and go off on the sides and interview a whole bunch of different people, take a whole bunch of photographs. Those are actually, for me, one of the most treasured photographs that I have are from the Fan Fest. But that thing was completely out of control. So that was in 2007 when at the Cow Palace. We haven't had in the Bay Area a Fan Fest of large proportions since that, because this was such a disaster. So I remember when we both showed up in the parking lot, we're like, you know what, this isn't going to work out well, was it?
But I knew a couple of days in advance, and then this is where you and I were talking, and Evan knows because I was reporting to him a lot of what was going on because Scotty Epstein hopped on a plane. Scott Epstein was a saint in wrestling. You want to know what a good human being is? For my money, present company accepted, but Scott Epstein, who Ev can talk about as well, because he was around him more because of proximity. But all I had to do was ask Scott, say, oh, this thing is going to, I think a lot of people are going to get ripped off. This was a mess. This was like the Tuesday before the Friday, Saturday, Sunday of it. And he just hopped on a plane to come out and help me. He stayed, as Evan knows, as Meltzer would call me each night, and sometimes several times a day to find out what the hell was going on. Because these promoters, and this was in a period when, as Evan might remember, there were two major fiascos. There was an Indiana Fan Fest where the promoter jumped out the window with a cash box, and guys like Ricky Morton and Tommy Rich, who drove 14, 18 more hours each way, didn't get a dime, and these are guys who were destitute and needed that money. So there was that scummy thing like 6 weeks before the Cow Palace. What was it called? Wrestle Reunion?
No, it was Russell Fan Fest.
Russell Fan Fest, real original. And then there was the New York one where at the last minute, Billy Graham and Jesse Ventura. Evan, remember that one? They pulled out of it because they smelled a rat. And the same thing. I think the parents put the kibosh and took the cash box and their kid, the promoter, out of there. Evan, remember that one?
Yeah. We won't name any names to protect the guilty, but yeah.
That was a fiasco. So then there was this. And so because I was on edge, I saw these other two things that happened like in a 5-6 week period prior to the Cow Palace thing. So Scott comes out to help me out, to help document it and what have you. And there were so many things, it's hard to know where to go. But Scott and that Shad Gaspar, who I stayed friends with, who just died, who was... Here was a guy who...
Chad Jasper just died?
Yeah, he drowned. He was the guy from WWF, part of Crime Time, that drowned, but I was really close.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
He lived in NorCal, then they moved to like Venice, Marina del Rey area in SoCal. And I would see him at all of Icebox's shows because they had like, the whole roster was African-American and Hispanic people. It was all people of color, very diverse locker room, which was fantastic. But he had sort of charlatan me in like last November to come with him and photograph him on a wrestling panel at the LA Comic-Con. So I flew down there and, I forgot what he had said. Oh, he told me that Bill Watts' kid was going to be there. And when I get there, it was the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, which was really Port Hueneme, 3 hours north of Hollywood, having nothing to do with Hollywood. But it was Eric Watts, a 7-foot-tall African-American guy with the same name as Bill Watts' wrestling son. So I got, not really suckered, but it was just he wanted someone to document it. He could have just asked me. But so I have a lot of great memories. What a hero and great person Shad Gaspar was. He was at that Cow Palace. He volunteered and stayed around with me and Scott Epstein when it was over. And long story short, it was a 3-day thing. It was like Friday afternoon from about 2 or 12 on to 5 with like the Dudley brothers and Piper knocking out and beating the shit out of the promoter to get their money that Saturday morning. And then that Saturday night is when the promoter and his wife, these guys had never had anything to do with wrestling. And I guess I can't even give they had like 5 aliases, the police said. But the excuse that they used to get people that Evan and I were really close to, Nikolai Volkov, Jimmy Snuka, I could go on, Greg Valentine, Beefcake too.
Snuka was in tears, right? I mean, you had to lend him money to get back to Hawaii, right?
Yeah, well, there's so many guys, and then there was an MMA component. And so what these guys did was...
they had to shut down the ring because the ring wasn't set up right. It didn't meet MMA specifications. They couldn't have the MMA fight. They couldn't
have it, but the problem was that the husband and wife they used the excuse to get these wrestlers to book their own flights, and then they were told that they would be paid and compensated for their airfare once they got there, which it's got to be a work.
Why did wrestlers believe that? That's the thing that I found most mysterious.
I think they try to... Hopefully these guys, they want, like Nikolai Volkov, you could not find a nicer guy, as Evan is writing about him in his book. Really ethical, honest, moral, fantastic human being. Even the wrestling part aside, I think we would love Nikolai Volkov. But so they came out, but they agreed to this bullshit when the husband and wife said, the so-called husband was a San Francisco police cop shot in the line of battle, and this was his one dream, to put on a wrestling show. So that was all completely non-true that the police said. So they left on night 2. They took the Saturday night. They took the cash bucks for the wrestlers, the cash bucks for the MMA guys. The MMA guys start rioting amongst themselves. That's when Dog the Bounty Hunter's son and his bodyguard cold-cocked Don Fry, and he went after them. And then we had to, I'll come back to that one. But they fled. So immediately when I got word of that, I was standing there with Rick and Scott Steiner and some others, and we called the cops. And they tried catching these guys, but they crossed into state lines into Nevada fairly quickly with all the money. Back to the MMA thing. So some of the toughest, legit tough guys in wrestling, that would be Warlord. I think Barbarian was there, the Steiners, my friend Dr. Death Steve Williams, who wrestled on the show, and a couple of other really super tough guys.
Scott Norton. I remember Scott Norton in particular.
And the next
so
day,
I talked to him, and he was like asking me where to find these guys, because he saw I had the all access pass on me, and he was like, I'm going to find these guys, and I'm going to tear them apart with my own bare hands. And I was like, go ahead, Scott. I have nothing to do with the promotion. Just over there. Go over there. I was really scared.
The MMA component, they called the cops on Don Fry, and so we hit him. All these tough guys and just me, a non-tough guy, hid Don Fry from the police. I think we snuck him into Scott Steiner's hotel room there at the SFO Marriott. And but anyway, Scotty Goldstein and Shad Gaspard stuck around, and Scott rearranged his plane flight so they could go to all 3 police. See, the Cow Palace was sitting on a municipality that's governed by like 3 counties, which we had to go to 3 different county police departments and 3 different county DAs to file charges. And so Scott Epstein and Shad Gaspard went with me to these things. And, it's like I can't even begin to tell you what they did. They canceled the plane flights for Sunday and Monday. So a lot of these wrestlers, when they got to the airport or prior to, they found out they had no flights, so they had to pay their own way back. They weren't reimbursed for their flights in. They weren't paid. They canceled the hotel room. So that Monday morning, I think, buddy, you were with me when I was there with Francine and Don Marie and a few of them.
Yes.
They all slept because they had no rooms. They didn't really have the money, nor could they really afford it. So they all slept all night long that Sunday into Monday night before they were to fly out. In the hotel lobby, on the floor, in chairs, whatever was there. It was a massive group of people. And when Steve Austin, it was that goofy eye doctor Money Mark Sunday, who paid for Austin and China and Goldberg to be there. When I told them all about it before, I have to warn you guys what's going on here. So I warned each of them when they arrived in their limos. And they were paid separately by the Money Mark eye doctor just to do signings, Polaroids and signings. And they said they, would help, and particularly Goldberg and Roddy Piper. They were really upset that all of these great legends, Harley Race, Nick Bockwinkel, they weren't paid, and they got stuck paying their way there and back. At least they could afford to get a hotel room that night. But also, like when Snuka, so we had to help out, and Shad Gaspard helped me, as did Scott, find trans to the airport. Because these guys, to save money, this husband and wife scumbag team, the promoters, were not flying him into adjacent SFO, which was like 5 minutes away.
I remember this. Yes.
They were flying him out of Sacramento and San Jose and like Ontario and all these insanely far away, hours and hours and hours away. So we had to get those guys to those airports to even fly out, a number of them, not all. But Jimmy Snuka and Nikolai Volkov, saying to me, why would these people treat us this way? Or Harley Race, that was really horrific. And so not only have we not had any conventions in the Bay Area, but that was kind of the end. It was so well publicized. Meltzer devoted pages and pages on what a ripoff it was. The worst ripoff I've ever seen in wrestling. And we haven't had anything like that since. And thankfully, Mike Bucci and High Spots put on quality, wrestle cons, I think they call them. But, where you didn't have to worry. Nobody had to worry. It was done properly, ethically after this fiasco. And I still talk to people who the talent that were ripped off, and they say worst thing I've ever seen or been involved with in wrestling. The TNA guys, luckily, Bill Banks made sure they got paid in advance. They were sent in as a package deal. They wrestled Friday night and then were out of there. The Dudleys against the Steiners in the opener. Who would put the Dudleys against the Steiners in the opener? But that's what they did on the crazy show.
Crazy. And then they had that battle royal with every independent wrestler they could get their hands on in the entire, Northern California area.
Battle royal, right?
Yeah. It was absolutely, and when they showed when we had the first match there, and there were only in the Cow Palace that holds about 10,000 people. We had 400 people, in the stands. I was like, this isn't going to go well, during the convention.
They banned me because they knew I called the police. They had the one guy there, I can forget his name. I have it all written down. I have the police records and reports from Daly City, Brisbane, and South San Francisco were the three districts we all had to go to file charges and try to extradite them and all that stuff, which is bringing back really bad memories. But, oh, geez. Yeah, see, I get all bogged in these details, and I'm getting senior brain farts. Anyway, it was horrific. We managed to get everybody to their airport and stuff. But I was contacted Scott Norton to promote his book a couple of months ago, and he remembered this is what I was going to say. Brutus Beefcake, who, Ed Leslie's a nice guy. I've never been a fan of his, really. I'm more of the Billy Robinson or the Jushin Liger stuff, or any of the New Japan current fantastic talents. Okada in particular, or Kenny Omega. But Beefcake knew that he was going to get ripped off, and he made the most of it, and I was impressed with what he did. He was in a tag match with Valentine, and I forget who they were working with, against maybe...
Coco Beware, and I'm trying to remember.
Coco and Dr. Death Steve Williams.
Yeah, Dr. Death, that's right. Yes.
All right. But
a dream booking, if ever there was one.
But you remember Beefcake, in the middle of all this chaos, he knew he wasn't going to get paid. He knew he was out of all this money. He still had fun, and he yelled. I think he got on the mic, but he yelled it loud enough that those 300 people, for a pretty damn decent card, because the main event was Great Muta against Billy Kidman, who could still go then. But anyway, so Ed Leslie, Brutus Beef, gets on the mic and he goes, "I effing love this shit." Meaning he still had the passion for wrestling, and it changed my opinion. I go, this guy's not so bad. He's got a horrific situation. He lived in Florida. He's out here in California. He's going to lose a ton of money, and he still maintained a positive attitude. So that changed my attitude about him. And whereas, the rest of the guys were just really sad that they were so disrespected, and it really dug at them. Particularly,
so often, Evan and I talk about the poor promoter that gets taken by the talent and gets ripped off by the venue. This was the situation where the promoters did the exact opposite. They ripped off everybody else, and everybody else got shafted. I think the Cow Palace, was owed like $100,000 in the end.
So they allowed me into the office. I was going to ask you if you went to the Ring of Honor show that Sunday afternoon, because they left one guy who would then go to all the photo things and collect the money. So they did have one stooge in there. And so he told me, you're banned. And then I just went to the Cow Palace people, and they let me sit in the box and call the police on them and blah, blah, blah. They came to get this guy and interviewed him. I still don't recall now what happened with him. But did you go to that Ring of Honor show that Sunday?
Oh, no. After the Saturday, I was like, this thing, I don't want to get drawn into it. After Scott Norton scared the hell out of me, I was like, I'm getting out of here before there's a full-scale riot.
You weren't with me when we tried to hide Don Fry? Because
No. You told me all about that after the fact. I was like, I am out of here. I don't want to come back. It was
Haku, Scott Norton, Warlord, Barbarian, Steve Williams, the Steiners, we all hid and kept him away so Don Fry wouldn't be wrongfully arrested, because he got cold cocked and hit, but everybody was upset and frustrated. And the MMA guys, there was like a riot amongst those guys when they found out they weren't going to get paid, and their trans and their hotel and meals, nothing was covered as promised. So what I am doing now, and it might be a little, I'm going to put on various websites like the one Evan hooked me up with recently that I really am thankful for. I'm doing exhaustive.
Post.
Yeah, Wrestling Post. I'm doing exhaustive pieces on the history of wrestling fan conventions, and it's not a thorough thing. Anybody that might have stuff to add, they can add to it, so it's an ongoing.
I will.
So there are conventions dating back to WFIA and even before that in the 60s. And then the history of wrestling radio shows. And Evan, of course, has lots of stuff in there for a jillion years of different shows. And I'm doing another one. Let's see, wrestling radio, and wrestling radio, and then how it's led to podcasts now. But wrestling radio, wrestling fan conventions, and I think wrestling schools and wrestling trainers will be one I've not yet tackled. But I have some of these things that I think people need to learn their history. I get upset when I go in the locker room of stuff now, and nobody knows Carney. It's like my home base, All Pro Wrestling APW promotion. There are very few that know it. Jeff Cobb does, and some others, but a lot of guys don't know Carney. They don't even know the regular terminology. It's a little bit foreign to them. Going over, going under, push, heat. Sometimes, not all. Some of them know those things. The basic ones like heat, you have to know. But all these traditions, and that's why a lot of these guys don't know the art of psychology, and it's just like a series of spots. So when I first met Brian Cage, who's now killing it in AEW, he's doing great. He was Impact champion, all of this great stuff, Lucha Underground. But his gimmick, early on, like on early Pro Wrestling Guerrilla shows and stuff he was on in Northern Cal, was get my effing S in. And he'd sell T-shirts with the initials for that. And that was kind of the thing that upset me was, get my effing spots in. Well, wrestling's not about a series of spots. I mean, it has to make sense. That's why Johnny Valentine could put a headlock on Jack Briscoe in a match I shot in Florida, for, I don't know what, was it 20 minutes? We saw that in APW with Tim Thatcher and, Oliver John. They did a match. Oh,
yes, that was a great match.
Where they were trying to recreate that moment, and it was just fantastic. So a big plug for APW there, and all the Northern California promotions. And you, buddy, for seeing what a great talent Tim Thatcher was from the SAC area. I guess, so I bought headline and sinker that he was from Britain, just here in the States to learn wrestling. That was all bullshit. Tim Thatcher was Sacramento guy. I don't think he's got English blood in him, but he's not from
got English teeth. He's got the bad. But that's what we used to say during the interviews. We'd say, like, if he wasn't British, how come his teeth are so awful?
Well, he stole the Steve Regal gimmick on your show. Earliest on, he did the hand behind his back, demanding matches be marked.
And we had a valet for him. We had a butler. He had a butler that took him to the ring, which is great stuff.
Ginzburg rules, but what a talent he is now. Is like the head shooter hooker for. And there's another article there is the history of hooker shooters in wrestling. We've lost so many. Now you want to call a guy like Kurt Angle a hooker shooter, okay, but I don't think I'd put him in the same category as Thez, Bert Asariti, Billy Robinson, Carl Gott.
Well, now you have hooker shooters just go directly into MMA. They don't make wrestling as their first stop or whatever. They go to MMA first, do what they can in MMA, and when their careers are headed downwards, then they kind of do the Bobby Lashley thing and go into pro wrestling as kind of or Ronda Rousey. You see her. They make their stops in professional wrestling, but MMA is what takes them in.
As a wrestler, but then he was doing double duty, doing MMA, and his career kind of. I don't know. It wasn't. Nobody was talking about it the way they were. Mark Kerr and Coleman, or folks like that. Josh Barnett really had significant, primarily in New Japan, where Inoki, the founder, and later on the guys that took over New Japan. They really love that stuff, bringing in legit tough guys. But I mean, Inoki brought in Leon and Michael Spinks, and just a wealth of Wilhelm Ruska, legit gold medalist that Gene LaBelle trained. Gene LaBelle was the ref for Ali Inoki. I don't have to say any more than the godfather of legit grappling. And there's a hooker shooter guy right there. And Gene is not answering emails now. I think he's been in ill health, which is really sad for me because he was like the one bright shining star. We were all afraid of Eileen Eaton. We didn't like Mike LaBelle, but everybody loved Gene LaBelle. And,
he was a legend, true legend. You know what? I knew this would happen. We're out of time. You've just absolutely filled this hour with just a million wonderful gems of things. I hope everyone gets a chance to listen to the show. Do you have anything you'd like to talk about, to promote any upcoming shows that you're doing, or have people tune into your website you want the fans to be able to keep track of?
I'm not good on social media, but my email since 1990-91 is reallano, WREALANO @AOL.com, which signifies I'm old. Reallano with a W in front at AOL.com. Please go and study, look up Hana Kimura's matches, look at all the great things she accomplished. She would have done so much more in the business, but we've had a lot of other guys, Mike Awesome, etc., who committed suicide when they were bullied in wrestling. With her, it was the TV show people that watched her on that reality show where she was a wrestler. And Evan's book, I'll promote that because I'm going to contribute photos, but I know that's going to be terrific in this show that you guys are doing. Two guys that have lots of history, loads of history with Ev. And I guess support your indies when they get going again. There's a lot of fantastic stuff out there. I don't know, APW, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla are the ones that really come to mind. I don't know if WWE and Hunter Paul Levesque are buying Evolve from Gabe Sapolsky or what's going on there, but the indies are really where it's at, and you'll have the most fun. This is like, we got to get through this pandemic and cures and people wearing masks to stop the spread before we can even have shows or we can go out and do stuff. I mean, they opened up my gym for like 2.5 weeks, and now it's closed again, and we're all putting on COVID weight and stuff. I had to shave. I had like a 1.5 week beard for this show, COVID beards and COVID weight. So let's defeat COVID. Let's not be numbskull knuckleheads. Wear your mask and distance. Don't just put on the mask when you can't socially distance like an idiot like Trump. You need to socially distance at least 6 or more feet and wear the mask from the top of the bridge of your nose, way under your chin. And don't just wear a stupid visor because that does nothing. A visor with a mask like we use in surgery, great. But a visor by itself, a clear visor, really isn't going to do anybody else any good.
That's great advice. We really appreciate it. I can't say enough about how wonderful it has been to have you as a guest on the show. And I say it to other guests, and I mean it, but to you, I really mean it. We've got to have you on again because we didn't even scratch the surface, and Evan didn't even get any chance to ask you anything.
Oh, poor Evan. Yeah, well,
we just pushed you right over to the side there, Evan, and just steamrolled you with this Russell Fan Fest stuff. But we promise we'll let you guys let you get a word in next week.
Evan is the king of documentaries and getting stuff promoted properly, whether it's COVID Con or 350 Days of Documentary or The Wrestler. Evan is he's got more energy, about a zillion times more than I have now. I just had a shingles part 2 shot and I'm just dying, but I hope I had some energy today. I'm in like the most intense pain from this stupid thing.
Sorry.
So, domo arigatou gozaimashite, combate kudasai. Luckily, that's one other thing I think Ev knows is I purposely tried to learn all the languages of people I had to shoot. Spanish, Tagalog, like French, and definitely Japanese, Nihongo.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for being our guest. We'll have you on again real soon, and have a great day, and best of health to you and your family.
Thank you.
All right, see y'all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.